Michael, Bill and I are co-founders of Worldwide Studios. Our whole goal is just to help people build with the latest stacks. Right now, we're actually running a 30-day open community hardware play. It's the most distributed program we've done so far. New York, Seattle, San Francisco, and virtual. We've had over 200 engineers in the last month. Their first prototypes or startups make continued iterations.
Well, I'm a big fan of both Studio 45 and 55, as well as I love those folks. Yep. So it's fun to see that you're doing that. I read a little bit about your kind of effort there, and I'm a fan.
Appreciate it. Someone who's come seen the community. It's something that can't just stay in San Francisco. So when starting to look at these tools, even ChatGPT, but also in terms of learning guides, well, we've been helping people build with machine learning or hardware in the last couple of months. The question is like, what does it also look like to practice things like philosophy or even different life skills like cooking or remodeling? And the internet right now is so much about consuming. Like I was just starting at, hey, how do I start learning about the Nicomachean ethics, Aristotle? The first thing that comes up is a 9-hour YouTube video, which is a perfect audiobook where the comments are like, this is so great. After 5 minutes, I got so bored. And so the question that we have is like, how do we start leveraging these generative models, which are engaging, interactive, so people can learn by doing? And the way that we built up these skill trees is that you can make your own nodes, you can design your own learning paths. And as you design your own learning paths, each node is about a 15-20 minute do something task or challenge or side quest, and you get feedback immediately. And so now instead of just sitting and listening for 9 hours straight, where you're like, I don't even have my own thoughts. How do these trees actually evolve to meet someone where they're at and where they want to go? And so we'll jump into a live demo. The last question we've been asking too is, how do you create a platform that truly respects how generative these foundation models are, that can enable different learning pathways, different outcomes? There's like one absolute tree, which is the best way to go through Intro to Aristotle. Or if someone picks up that tree, can they branch it and do their own thing? And so that's some of the inspiration behind the design of this. And we'll just jump right straight into the product. And so the product itself is V2. You all getting the first look at some of these new features. If you want to try it afterwards, we'll send you an invite so you can try it out. Simply, we've got 3 different parts. We've got a tutor or coach on the left, which acts as a chat. You can see for this, I started with like the most baseline thing. I don't know what I want to do, but I think I want to learn Aristotle. So where should I start? And this is a basic assistant API call where you've got different information. Here's the background, here's this text. And so being very lazy, I literally just copied this. And I was like, okay, now make me an intro for the Aristotle's biography. So that's the first node, is the intro. Then I was like, okay, about the Nicomachean ethics, what's that intro? Influence on the West. And so on the left, we've got the chat. You can talk to it just like you would ChatGPT. And the whole goal is to get to do something on the canvas. The canvas in the middle is a bunch of fixed nodes that show some kind of progress and journey. And then on the right, we've got these 1-page memos that, again, bring that 20-minute, you're doing like a quick learning, or you're doing something 20, 30 minutes. If you're doing like a coding project, some of these nodes can also take 1, 2, 3 hours, like you're shipping a YOLO V8 project. So this is how it's set up. We got chat on the left, make a node here, and we can even just make a node to show what that looks like. So the last node I went down on this branch was really trying to understand eudaimonia. In Aristotle's context is, what does it mean to be in a state of cultivating happiness and purpose versus just that fleeting sense? And this node, which was interesting, he wasn't actually the only one talking about it. Plato, his teacher, and then also the Stoics at the same time had their own take. So the main node here I asked was like, hey, what are the different takes on eudaimonia, and how is that different from Aristotle? So Plato was a little bit more idealistic, looking at like soul, so some really like concepts, trying to bring it a lot more guided. For him, it's really about that practice, that intentional action day to day. For the Stoics, they had a different thing entirely. They really wanted to respect human nature and reason. So instead of cultivating something, it's just like whatever the nature is of like what we wanted to consume, indulge in, and things like that. So got the 1-pager on the right. So if we wanted to make a new node, let's say on top of this node, I wanted to better understand what is the Stoics take. So I clicked on the top. We've got the tool node creation. So that's going to search the web, find a YouTube video, make a node. So we can say, tell me more about the Stoics concept of eudaimonia, and give some examples. And so now up here on this skill tree, that's just where my learning path. This was probably about 2 hours total. Been doing like minutes every day, just better understanding different concepts. And I'll show where the new feedback node comes in with this one. And so this is just where it's at in the first 2 weeks for this tree. And so we can see here, based off this node, it's now pulling a YouTube video. these videos, we're not looking for the most viral video. We're actually trying to search for the most helpful video. So video that's less than 20, 30 minutes, that if you're coding a project, it becomes a tutorial. And a lot of these philosophy takes, it actually ends up being really interesting because it's a niche author or lecturer or take, and they become fun to watch. So we've got one specifically on Stoic Eudaimonia. We got a one pager if you just want to read. So let's read it. In Stoic, happiness decides on external. So it's internal reason, pursuit of some of the main virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. The Stoics emphasize what is within our control, our thoughts, our actions, our attitudes, while accepting external events. For example, when facing a personal setback, like you lose your job, a Stoic would view this as an opportunity to practice resilience and wisdom, focusing on proactive steps rather than letting the situation design your internal state. So based off of this node, the new feature we're demoing today, the goal is to get feedback based off of whatever that node is. So for this, it's like we want to try to understand eudaimonia from a Stoic concept. And so it's reflect on a recent challenge and identify how practicing one of these virtues helped you improve your response. So we can say, last week we had with extra attendance, needed a new venue. So this is a very simple one line. Let's see if it says. So context, last week we were hosting the Lindy Hack. We had a space for 50 people. We had over 600 people sign up. So the last 2 weeks was a scramble to get a new venue. Instead of letting that deter our state, it was just like, hey, what actions can we take to find a spot and just solve that problem? This is a very simple one line. So we'll see what it says. The goal for each one of these nodes is as you submit, right now it's text-based, in the future it'll be image-based or even file-based. Once you submit that initial response, you'll get feedback back. And you can think of this like experience points. So each node, subjective right now, 50 experience points. That was a bad response. I was just like, hey, I had this thing, I think this answer, right? But it's not bad in terms of like you failed. It's like, let's actually get better here. So while you correctly identified a recent challenge, you didn't actually show your understanding of one of the values. Okay, improve your response. Bias towards action is a general approach, not a virtue. This exercise helped figure that out. To get a better score, better understand one of the challenges. When reflecting on a challenge, identify the virtue, focus on internal. Okay, let's say, so we've got the same response. So let's try it again. Bias towards action follows the virtue of courage. Many people don't act out of fear of failure. We just went for it, got a bunch of no's and rejection, and carried on. So just adding one line to see how that might improve. We were at 12 out of 50. And as things submit, interesting thing from the product side, we're really trying to understand how helpful can be as a feedback loop. So now you're getting instant feedback to continue get better and better at this specific node. So we doubled our score here. We're still missing some of the points. And so for our goal right now is if someone is missing one of the main insights or understanding of this node, whether it's technical or conceptual, like this, the feedback is really set up to be like, hey, based off this node, you're still not quite getting the point, right? So one of the things we're missing here is like what that means for internal state versus external state. And that's actually a really interesting insight. So if I missed this, I didn't watch the YouTube video either. So I'm going off of a one pager, 3 lines of text and just one lining it. But after YouTube video and this one pager, it's really interesting to be able to filter, like if you really want to understand the Stoic definition of eudaimonia, you really have to understand that control over the internal state. And like, interesting feedback. Let's try one more time. In terms of internal state, we had one team member super anxious and thought we should cancel share invites. In terms of the other team, or let's make it even first person in terms of, and so now I'm just saying, hey, based off of personal people being anxious around, wow, this event blew up, wow, we have to make decisions, and just personally was taking action, even regardless of those thoughts, to then see. So let's see. So our main goal for this is to be able to have a self-closed feedback loop. So as you're learning a larger scale at each state, and so this is actually really interesting. So now those 3 main points, being able to understand what this is, how to actually connect it back to the philosophy. And then the last one is like, what's the what here? Now we've got like a baseline passing score for this. And so goals not to be perfect. This isn't school, can then move on from this node and continue. So the way I've personally been going through this specific tree is been taking different concepts and making different branches. So this is the eudaimonia branch. And then the one that I did this morning right before this, I was just starting to understand Aristotle. He talks a lot about the importance of friendship. And so this was actually a super interesting, which was really about how to understand the role of relationships, community, and like that motivation comes from. Because for Aristotle, a lot of his ethics are really around internal character cultivations. And so this was a super fun one. So my main mental model is I'm just branching off different concepts here and I can continue on. So to really free form. So that's the demo. I'll pause here. Happy to answer any questions around this. Happy to answer any questions that you have around product. Goal here is to be able to have a conversation. And the context here, this product is now 2 weeks old. Also, roast us. If you're like, hey, that doesn't make sense. Hey, I've seen this better. We're open for that too. This is not perfect.
I'm actually kind of curious. So it looks like you're building a tree. It's good. I get Skilltree. The visual node thing with a collection of assumptions that I have, like that I would be able to understand how those nodes relate to each other. So the arrows are verbs that tell me this relates to that. This is a branch of eudaimonia. That is whatever. So that's not a roast or anything. It's more like, I'm not sure what that skill tree is telling me, just aside from little dots moving from one point to another. And I don't know how the concepts relate to each other. So I'm not building a mental model, and I'm thinking about the Feynman way, right? So Richard Feynman had this way of saying, if I could draw a diagram, if I can make an analogy, I can make a metaphor, and someone can diagram it or make it with common language for a 10-year-old, then people can extend your thinking, right? And so he was the great explainer by the time he died. And so I don't see how I could extend my thinking, because I don't see my thinking externalized here. I don't see verbs connecting nodes that are nouns or concepts. And I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying, what is the value of that tree in the middle?
Yeah, they're great points. And the thing we don't know for how people want to use this, is it better to do a bottom up, make a skill tree as you're following and cultivating your own curiosity? Right now, this is set up as purely explore, whether it's a concept or an objective, build a tree and nodes as you go. I think that's so important in the 21st century, because if you don't ask what you're actually curious about, you're going to be people are going to fill that in. What's on our roadmap right now and where this has been helpful is when you start getting a specific objective, like ship a project or write a blog post around what it means to be a good life, can we actually backfill a skill tree? So could we start with an interesting podcast or an essay or a whole work from Aristotle and start to backfill the skill tree? And so that's been more helpful when it's been more oriented. But from an understanding your curiosity perspective, we're testing out this kind of node by node. And you can think of this more like a mind map to start. And so the two things that are on our roadmap in the next month are, one, can you actually start with an end in mind, be it tutorial or PDF, and can it backfill the skill tree? So it's very clear, I want to complete this, and this is the invisible scaffolding to get there. And then two, looking at the onboarding experience, we're looking at ways to turning the left chat, rather than just being an assistant or a coach as you go, also in terms of onboarding, helping people understand what is your intent for this. And that's something we've been doing manually so far. And so the human to human layer.
I like where you're going with it. The product, and of course, people are both bottom up and top down. You know, have a mission. Sometimes they just want to wander, or I'm feeling lucky and do random walks in a tree through a park. I guess the other thing I'm curious about is, so I want to do Eudaimonia and those kind of spaces sort of dovetail with like Lori Santos has been teaching at Yale, where it's about the good life. And so how to actually savor experiences and actually live a good life. She gave a great talk at Aspet Ideas about it with some of the most wealthy people on the planet. She's like, why did you come to this talk? It's about the good life. Aren't you guys rich and whatever? And of course they all came because money and things don't buy happiness and good life. So what I'd like to know is, okay, we've got the Eudaimonia branch that goes through Aristotle and others. How does that relate to Lori Santos' work and the current work in positive behavioral psychology and behavioral economics? And how is it different? So how would that show up on the skill tree?
So right now in its current form, if we're just respecting this as the pilot, and it is, you can take, so part of the skill tree is connecting different dots. So right now we just did the Stoics Eudaimonia branch. You said how...
Lori Santos, Good Life, Yale. She teaches one of the most popular classes at Yale. Millions of people go to it basically. Because when you're a freshman at Yale, you're intimidated quite a lot, and you just 100%. Went from being valedictorian to nothing.
So the first thing you can do, so when we think about like what goal of this interface is, the goal is to be as focused as possible in one space. So if you don't even know the question of like, how do I get started to get to Lori Sanchez, you can just talk to this as you would like chat.com, saying, hey, what are some 5 modern, I don't know if this is a good question, right? I don't know if we'll get to Lori.
Good question, yeah.
What are 5 modern takes? So this is starting to bring up fields. We've got psychology, work-life balance. So we can say, who are 5 practicing philosophers who I can add and to help. So let's say we're starting to bias it a little bit too. So first thing, you can just discover in the chat to get that seed for that next node, right? So assuming that this is a focused platform and you're like, I don't have someone to talk to, what does that look like? We could start here and let's just see what the initial results look like here. Once you have those results, then you could start again. If this is more of a mind map, so we've got Martha Nussbaum, Kahneman, yep. And these are more like development psychologists. And so this could be prompted better. Once you have someone you want to explore, again, if we're treating this more as a bottom-up mind map, then once we've got the Stoic take, we're like, done with history. I want to understand current takes. Then we can make a new node just around Lori Sanchez's work and continue down that path. So in the current take, what it looks like is this becomes a bottom-up, make your own connections nodes, and then based off that information, complete each node. When thinking about, pause there. So curious if you have questions or feedback on that, Mickey.
No, I'm enjoying just watching you explore it.
So what this did was this made a one-pager. We now have her work. We've got the context.
Another question. So then I noticed you've got the submit for evaluation, or the idea of bias to action. Imagine you read the one-pager, you watched the little clip or something like that. It asks a question, right? So implement one evidence-based strategy from Santos' teaching. So let's say I say this is what I'm going to do, and I submit it for evaluation. How does that show up in the skill tree? In other words, how does it show that I got the essence of it? I didn't get the essence of it. Great. So that I see like red, yellow, green, map or something.
Good question. As this is V2, V1 has states where it's like progress or complete. Right now, we just finished this eval scores. And so right now, the score is the main way to see it. That'll be reflected on the canvas. So the goal here for the canvas, in progress, complete, not live right now, but there would be different colors for each node. So you could track like all the yellow nodes that are in progress. Nodes too, if you're inheriting a skill tree, we've been using gray for locked.
Sorry, a quick question on that. For example, let's say I'm trying to understand this, or I'm working on this node. Is the tutor on the left kind of have that context where like I could ask it questions about this specific topic?
Yeah, now it has memory, so it remembers everything in the chat. We're now working on a feed forward where it'll take the nodes, it'll understand what's there. So just like in chat, for at least the next week as we're building that out, you'd have to copy and paste it. So you can say, hey, should I know? And it's got memory in the chat. Our long-term goal is to figure out how to connect both the nodes and what is said and what's not said. So it really becomes a smart, responsive environment. So right now we got memory working here for persistence, not quite connected to the nodes yet. Great point. You're muted. Mickey, you're muted if you're sharing a comment.
It's probably great. I should be muted more often. You choose which model it's using?
Right now, no.
I think do multiple models at once so that I get different perspectives. I'm very nervous about and how hybrid vigor is really important in teams. And if I only have one LLM, it's like having one person who just happened to go to MIT and they're always going to talk the same way, versus somebody who went to CMU who's going to have a very different religion.
Great point. When looking at even how Perplexity got started, they were trying to figure out what model works best for the singular task before they did model switching or routing.
Good idea. Yeah.
The current mental model for products is auto routing because most people don't want to shift. So I would say that's probably a phase 2 on our roadmap. And when starting to think about some other layers of personalization outside of models, also like, can you adjust the system prompts? Can you adjust the personality? Can you change some of the, even do you have control over the eval? So I think there's a lot of areas that open up for customization and personalization. From a model perspective, our main goal right now is we don't even know if people want to use an interface like this. So overbuilding on personalization defeats the purpose of just using it. So if people are using it and they're like, hey, the number one thing we need is a smarter assistant on the left because we like GPT-5 or we like Claude 4.1 versus like, hey, it doesn't matter. We're taking in that feedback. So definitely hear you on the personalization. And we really think there's a larger question of we want to help people take action. And we're not totally sold that this is it. This is just our second take on what we've seen that has been helpful for putting it in one spot.
I like your idea of bias towards action. And well, it's amazing that it's like 2 weeks old, right? So you're getting, living out loud, which I love this. Take everything as just positive feed for you.
We treat feedback as a gift. So even that you have feedback, this is great that you're responding to it.
But the notion of bias towards action is sort of like do something and then do mindful reflection on it. In other words, how did it work? What did I think was going to happen? What happened? And then what do I reflect on that happening? So it's sort of want to stimulate mindfulness, right? And so I'm kind of curious how we tie the loop back from actual actions people took. Like, I decided to do this morning at this meeting. I decided I was going to do this approach. I was going to model this. And then I want to come back and go, I think Michael's going to appreciate that, or he's going to hate that, or it's going to really blow up into my face. Now I want to come back afterwards and then talk to it again and say, this is what actually happened, versus think about how like use accountability coaches and accountability helpers, right?
100%. And on the education side, we're starting with focusing on projects. So a project has some kind of output. You're shipping code, you're writing a blog post, you made a YouTube video. That also creates a web artifact that people can complete a tree with. So we're trying to understand, do people go down infinite rabbit holes and they just like the node by node, or there needs to be completion? So to your point, Mickey, if you're practicing a new mindset in a meeting and you want to log that time over time, right now we haven't scoped that in, but I think there is this tension between like completing a node to show that you have it versus practicing a node or a tree over time. And being able to log that could be interesting. I think right now that would either be a layer to the node or in the chat. And I think where letting users just tell us what they want to use it for. So if you're like, hey, I've got certain meetings where I need to send transcripts and get evaluated, and I don't need a full tree. I just need 3 nodes that evaluate different criteria. And I'm just going to go down those nodes. And maybe you suggest more like, hey, you were mindful, but you also still didn't do X or Y. But yeah, we haven't looked at that yet.
Have you guys thought at all about just setting milestones or kind of into, and I think for me, when I'm thinking about kind of skills, of course, you have kind of the short-term ones, which is like one shot, like I need to learn this, and then just break it down into components. And then you have kind of like the long-term, more open-ended ones. But usually in that, let's say I'm trying to learn piano. I want to play one song, and then I want to learn this other thing. Is there a way to think about how, okay, if I get to that point where I'm receiving enough validation that this is working, either by big idea into smaller milestones, or telling me, okay, not just the nodes, there's like where the nodes come together?
It's a great question. And our assumption right now, I can show you V1. So you've got a sense of where it started and where this canvas will evolve to. For V1, the main
By the way, just as an aside question, do you have a kind of sketch of your aspirational vision for what this thing can be?
Yeah, great question. I'll answer that in a second. For Sebastian's point, for V1, the way that we were thinking about projects is if you're a professional who only has 5 to 10 hours a week and you're working on a new project or cultivating a new skill set, everything is scoped to be completed in 2 weeks. So our assumption is like, this shouldn't become a crazy skill tree where it's like a video game. You're like, oh, look at the whole map. Maybe people like that and they want to see the master map. We've been thinking of like how you get the minimum amount of nodes to complete something, and to complete something will build a portfolio up. And so just like this page has a portfolio of projects, whether you're web scraping in no code or you're building a voice assistant, the idea is like as you clear a skill tree, you'll actually have whatever the fruits of that tree are, the final completion. And the initial way we've been looking at this from a meta learning perspective is how does difficulty increase over time? And then how do you continue down a tree? So if you made your first, we had a robotic engineer build his first medical voice assistant. His second skill tree was multimodal database logging. So instead of just building out a voice to talk with where that had lung cancer and he wanted to check in on that, his second tree was more on the back end and being able to receive images. And so our initial concept right now is the tree should be something that gets swapped out once you're done it. For things that aren't done, the canvas can stay open. You can infinitely explore. But with this idea of completion, think a lot about like time does it take? And what people like. I like extremes first. I would love if trees self-deleted in 2 weeks if you didn't finish them. So there's a little bit of like, you got to do it. I don't think most users will like that. So helping them figure out, hey, can you get to some endpoint in 2 weeks? And for project-based skill trees, it's a final demo. Submit a 2 to 3 minute video to Mickey's point earlier in like the diamond technique, show the demo, post it publicly. There's other things that come from growing your network. If you don't finish this top node, you don't finish the tree. And that's something, doing that from a generative perspective is such an interesting problem because these were all hard coded. We worked with dozens of people through different skill stacks and different projects. So we made these trees manually. When you don't have the manual tree and you're trying to figure out what that final node is, now that comes into the conversation with user intent, which that's what we're designing right now. How do we onboard to get a final node? If that's what people want. If people don't want a final node, it's exploratory. So does that answer your question, Sebastian?
Totally. No.
And I would also, on that tree, I would add, if you go back to that when you were just on.
Yep.
My final node is the end state, but if you look, it's kind of layered, and each of these is like a milestone. In this case here, like you have an intro, you learn loops list, you learn how to use Gummy, and then your first milestone is build your first Gum loop. And then you learn how to ask nodes, how to do a web search, then you build your first real automate. It's like a series of projects where there's a bunch of nodes that are theoretically optional, like you can just do the milestones as you go, but really it's like a series of nodes milestone that lets you build up to that final project.
We've taken a little bit of that structure away from like core trunk, because people don't want a core trunk where they're speed running of projects. We just want to see how just the generative nature unlock. And so, yeah, there's that there. Mickey,
Recently,
for your
I was at a
like larger vision. Right now, I don't think there's one place where we have everything. We've just been building in public, sharing updates. And so like this, and also just a lot of the experiences and programs we've been running. Our main question, we don't think software alone will solve this problem. We think this will unlock a lot of opportunities, just like Lovable has unlocked a lot of development opportunity for people to build their own websites or web applications. We want to see what the Lovable for learning looks like. But over the next 10 years, it's not enough to, we don't know if it's enough just to have the software. We're exploring what does the community layer look like? Because still human to human learning, this kind of conversation to us is 1,000 times more invaluable than sending screenshots to Gemini 2.5 Pro. Gemini will come in with the Apple UX design. Hey, you messed up this text, you messed up this button. We're like, thanks, Gemini. You've compressed the world's blog intelligence to give us some feedback. Hearing from humans, not only from a feedback perspective, but also from a knowledge traversing perspective. That's what we want to help unlock. And so as we figure out those.
I've been blown away by sort of hackathons, right? Like the way that you build community at Studio 45 or whatever in that process. But I think I've seen so many poorly run ones, and I've seen really well run ones. And I think you do an amazing job of doing a well run one that keeps it sort of friendly co-opetition. It keeps kind of community buzz. The thing I wonder though is that like this interface is a lone person sitting alone doing things. It's not like me, Dylan, and Kate all kind of about eudaimonia with you and learning from each other and going, oh, wait, I like the way she asked that question better than me, or I asked, oh, interesting. And what they're finding in classrooms right now is that there used to be very lively Discord channels. There used to be very lively Slack channels where people would be like little micro mentor moments of like a second here, 2 seconds there, things like that. And now disappeared. Yep. Teachers are watching it all collapse because all of those beautiful moments are being answered by ChatGPT. Yep. And so when we use it to do proximal learning with each other, it's pretty powerful. It amplifies brilliance and vigor. When we use it to collapse these things and be hidden away even further, it's sad. And I guess I keep seeing everyone, the major builders, the hyperscalers, they're all building as if you're only going to be one person.
It's all solo player. It's
weird. It's what happens in Minecraft. That's not what's happens in.
For them, I think it's a protocol to data exploration, right? Right. Long-term memory is the newest feature to fine-tune for personal chat. For us, one of our main hypotheses right now is what you're talking about at a hackathon or in a community program that's team building. You're building a project or something new in a team. It's like playing soccer or basketball. I don't think enough people have run as fast as they can, try to endure like that speed. So right now, our main assumption is you have to build first to be better in a team. And longer term, if we can get a single source of truth, like a skill tree, the best way to build YOLO V8 or the best way to implement a protocol in the OpenTrons Flex, once we get that skill tree, now it's like GitHub. It's very collaborative in how people branch. It's a lot easier to say where you stuck because there becomes a source of truth. That's how we've used the initial skill trees as people will go through the sprints. You're stuck at this point. Let's talk about it and branch off. And you can start socializing that. And so
I don't disagree with that. It makes sense. But it almost feels like you're thinking of community as a different thing than learning skills. And yet learning skills and community are like interwoven. And so the only thing I would say is there's some really beautiful work going on around collective embodied intelligence. And how are you implementing that? Because that's actually how we're building an active inference model of like things that surprise us individually and collectively. And we do a team, we're building a new brain, we're building a new mind. We celebrate when it dies, we go to its funeral. Teams are real entities. And they're not, oh, now we better have a community manager, or oh, those are not different. And I know that I'm more saying
it's such a great
I'd love to see it in the tool, because
that's such a great product point. That's the biggest opportunity we see in the next quarter. And the one thing I can leave you with in terms of vision, we want to figure out what does a guild look like for learning. And when you have a guild, you have different layers of understanding. Forget about the community manager, the program manager, the person who crushed one node. What does that DM look like on Discord or WhatsApp or on platform, however people want it? And so, yes, great point. I want to give the floor to Kate in case, Kate, you have any questions or anything. Appreciate you hopping on for the demo. And yeah, do you have any thoughts? Or just open questions too. And also totally okay if you're off mic too. Great, thanks for sending the link, Mickey. Anything else you want to end on? Any way we can be helpful for you as I know right now you're leading a bunch of different product sprints or different things, or anything we didn't touch on?
No, I just love what you're doing. I just wanted to learn. I want to encourage you to keep rolling. I guess, okay.
All right. Well, we're over time. Appreciate the conversation. Thanks for joining, Kate. Thanks for all the questions, Mickey. Conversation was awesome. We got so much to come through, and we're shipping weekly, so we'll keep you posted too on how things update.
Very cool.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.